The laughter hit harder than the music that night. In a ballroom filled with power and diamonds, one woman stood out, not for her wealth but for the color of her skin. She had built an empire with quiet brilliance, yet one arrogant act was meant to remind her she didn't belong. The glass of wine, a cruel smile, a room frozen between luxury and prejudice. But what no one knew was that she held the kind of power money could never buy. Seconds later, the same people who laughed would watch their fortune crumble. Because sometimes, respect costs everything. Naomi Pierce wasn't born into power. She built it, brick by brick, against every expectation that said she couldn't. The daughter of a school teacher and a factory worker, she grew up in a neighborhood where dreams were often traded for survival. But Naomi was different. Every late night spent studying under a dim lamp. Every no she turned into a challenge, carved her into the woman the world now admired. By 40, she had become the CEO of Pierce Technologies, a global firm reshaping the future of clean energy. Her success wasn't inherited, it was earned, polished through discipline and vision. That night, she arrived at the Sterling Foundation Gala as the guest of honor. Her company had just secured a $3 billion partnership with the prestigious Sterling Group, an alliance that promised innovation, influence, and legacy. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and whispered conversations. Silk gowns brushed marble floors, champagne flutes caught the light, and every smile carried calculation. Naomi moved through it all with quiet grace, her composure unshaken by the stares that followed her. Some were admiring, others questioned why a black woman stood at the center of a room built on old money and older prejudice. For Naomi, it was another stage, one she'd earned her place on. But beneath the elegance and applause, envy was waiting, dressed in diamonds and entitlement. And before the night was over, that envy would make its move. The evening began like every other elite gala, handshakes disguised as negotiations, laughter masking envy. Naomi Pierce stood beneath the golden light of the chandelier, every inch the portrait of calm success. Her black silk gown shimmered against the marble floor, a quiet rebellion in a room built for everyone but her. Cameras caught her smile, her posture, her poise, and yet behind every lens whispers began to gather. "She's impressive," one guest murmured. But bold of them to make her the face of such a deal. The words didn't need to be louder to cut deep. Naomi heard them, not through sound, but through the subtle shift in tone, the way people glanced, then turned away too quickly, their politeness practiced, their prejudice unspoken. The evening's host, Charles Sterling, billionaire CEO of the Sterling Group, greeted Naomi with the charm of a man used to owning every room he entered. But beside him, his younger sister, Isabella Sterling, radiated something colder, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. When Isabella approached, the air in the room seemed to tilt. Her diamond bracelet caught the light, her glass of crimson wine swirling lazily as she studied Naomi with the faintest trace of disdain. "You must be Naomi Pierce," she said sweetly, though her tone carried the weight of centuries. "My brother speaks so highly of your determination." Naomi thanked her, her voice even, her expression untouched. She'd met people like Isabella before, polite on the surface, poisonous underneath. But envy has a way of seeking attention, and the crowd, sensing the tension, turned to watch. Isabella stepped closer, her perfume sharp, her smile wider. "Not everyone earns a seat at this table," she said softly. "Some just find their way in." The air froze. A few guests chuckled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or look away. Naomi didn't flinch. She met Isabella's gaze, calm and unwavering. In that silence, her dignity was louder than any response. But Isabella wasn't finished. The silence fed her arrogance. Slowly, almost gracefully, she tilted her glass, and with one effortless motion, the wine spilled, splattering across Naomi's shoulder, the deep red seeping into the black silk like an open wound. Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras flashed. The music faltered. For a moment, time stopped. Naomi didn't move. The wine dripped onto the marble floor, a cruel symbol of mockery dressed as an accident. Isabella feigned surprise, her voice coated in sugar. "Oh my, I didn't even see you there. You blend in so easily." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, it was worse. It was restrained, controlled, and complicit. It was the kind of laughter that said, "This is what happens when you forget your place." Inside, Naomi felt the sting, not of the wine, but of history repeating itself in the most modern of rooms. But she didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't give the crowd what it expected. She simply reached for her phone, the movement slow and deliberate. To the onlookers, it looked like avoidance. To her assistant across the room, it was a signal. The hum of the crowd softened to a hush as Naomi pressed the phone to her ear. "Proceed." One word, barely audible. But in that instant, the air changed. The same people who had been entertained by her humiliation would soon realize the ground beneath them was beginning to crack. Isabella smirked, turning back toward her friends. But behind her, phones began to vibrate. Notifications flashed. Investors stared at their screens in confusion. A ripple of unease swept through the gala. Something was happening, something far bigger than a spilled glass of wine. And for the first time that night, Naomi Pierce let the silence do the talking. The ballroom, once alive with music and laughter, had turned eerily quiet. All that remained was the glow of screens, hundreds of them, lighting up faces with confusion and disbelief. Whispers turned to gasps as news alerts flooded in. Sterling Group's $3 billion deal terminated. Contract revoked. CEO under review. Isabella's laughter faltered. She turned toward her brother, her smugness fading into confusion. Charles's phone buzzed violently in his hand. His eyes widened as he read the message. The color drained from his face. Naomi stood where she had been humiliated moments before, her posture calm, her presence suddenly commanding the entire room. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The world had already begun to speak for her. Naomi, Charles stammered, stepping forward. This must be some kind of misunderstanding. But Naomi didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed fixed on Isabella, the woman still clutching her empty glass like a weapon gone cold. Isabella's words came out broken, uncertain. What did you do? Naomi took a step closer, her tone soft but unwavering. I reminded your investors what respect looks like. Moments earlier, that single word, proceed, had set in motion a series of encrypted communications. Naomi's company, the silent majority shareholder behind Sterling Group's biggest deal, had just withdrawn its support. With it went billions in promised funding, media confidence, and market trust. Reporters began whispering from the edges of the room. The very crowd that had watched her humiliation was now watching a reckoning. Isabella looked around, desperate for someone to laugh again, to restore the illusion of control. But no one did. Not this time. Charles reached out, his voice trembling. Naomi, please, we can... She turned to him, her eyes steady. You taught this room what power looks like. I'm just teaching them what consequence feels like. The chandelier above seemed to burn brighter, catching the red stain still on her dress, now not a mark of shame, but of survival. And as Naomi walked away through the stunned silence, the sound of her heels echoed like judgment in marble halls. Because that night, the balance of power didn't shift. It shattered. By morning, the story was everywhere. Headlines blazed across every major outlet. Not about the spilled wine, not about the gala's grandeur, but about what it revealed. Billionaire's sister humiliates black CEO. Family loses 3B deal overnight. Clips of the moment filled social media feeds. Isabella's smirk, the wine, the stunned silence, and Naomi's quiet, unflinching grace. Some tried to defend it as a misunderstanding. Others saw it for what it was, a public act of arrogance rooted in something far deeper than class. Naomi didn't respond to the press. She didn't need to. Her silence became its own statement, calm, measured, and more powerful than any interview could ever be. In the days that followed, investors withdrew. Sterling Group's value plummeted, and suddenly, those who had once turned away from Naomi were calling her name with admiration and regret. But Naomi wasn't chasing revenge. What she wanted wasn't an apology or validation. It was a reminder to the world that respect isn't granted by wealth or status, but earned through humanity. When asked later about that night, she only said one thing: I didn't ruin anyone's empire. They did that themselves. The moment they forgot who they were looking down on. Still, beneath her composure, Naomi knew what it had cost her. The exhaustion of constantly proving her worth. The pain of carrying dignity in spaces built to deny it. The truth was, she'd been fighting a quieter battle her whole life. One glass of wine didn't start it, and one victory wouldn't end it. Because the real story wasn't about a billionaire's sister or a corporate downfall. It was about a world that still measures worth by skin and status, that still forgets who builds its empires and keeps them standing. In boardrooms, in ballrooms, in everyday lives, people like Naomi are still tested, still questioned, still underestimated, and yet they rise, not with fury, but with brilliance, with poise, with power that can't be spilled or silenced. That night at the gala became more than a scandal. It became a symbol. A moment when the tables turned, not just in wealth, but in awareness. Because for every arrogant smile that tries to diminish another person's worth, there's someone standing in quiet defiance, waiting for the right moment to say, without a word, enough. And maybe that's the question this story leaves behind. How many more humiliations? How many more accidents before the world finally stops confusing privilege with power?